Teens, Bronies, Pegasisters, friends, and family. How are you enjoying BABSCon 2018? Thank you. I'm John Delancey. And I'm here. He's higher? Well, okay. How about now? How about now? Do you believe it now? No. Well, that should be the sound of my ego deflating. Now, I'm Silver Quill, and I will be your master of ceremonies for this here event as we celebrate the writers of the show MLP. We are waiting just a little bit on one more attendee. We all know writers and deadlines, they're natural entities. But I'm confident we'll get this show rolling. But I just wanted to first say, by a sound of applause, how much are you enjoying BABSCon? You are making the BABSCon staff sad. How much are you enjoying BABSCon? And now they are happy. Yay. Well, thank you very much, folks. Well, to start things off, though, we do have one writer, and I would love to introduce her to you. She has been actually a television actress, starring on both Our House, Major Dad, and made a cameo on Alf. Who here remembers Alf? Okay, you people don't make me feel old, and I love you for it. But she's also been a writer for the Superhero Squad, Transformers Prime, Young Justice, Miles from Tomorrowland, Transformers Rescue Bots, and recently concluded Star Wars Rebels. She's the executive producer for Season 8 and onwards, and writer for the Ponyville Mysteries comics under a pseudonym. Please welcome Nicole Dubuc. And I done messed up the name. It's Dubuc, not Dubuc. Even when I practice, she doesn't mean behind stage going Dubuc, Dubuc, Dubuc. Get up here, Dubuc. Ah! That's how it works. Oh. Hello. Hello. You got mic two? Oh.
I'm hearing it. I'm hearing it now. There we go.
I'm hearing it. So, Nicole, first off, congratulations on the conclusion of Star Wars Rebels.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, I was actually only on Season 3, but I did get to go for the wrap party on Season 4, and it was really neat. We all got to see it together, and just watching with everyone that worked on it was kind of magnetic and amazing.
So that means you worked on the introduction of Grand Admiral Thrawn.
Yes, I did.
So, and I have to ask, based on the conclusion of Rebels, do you think Thrawn is a fan of hugs?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. He's really into those. Yeah.
I can imagine him in Equestrian and Pinkie Pie. I find this hugging very disturbing.
Well, you heard my thing, right? It's like that Thrawn could never defeat the main six because of Pinkie, right?
Oh yeah, totally unpredictable to a military mind.
That's right.
Biggest pony. But turning from the Star Wars, which is ever-expanding universe, to My Little Pony with its ever-expanding universe. Because we are looking forward to the introduction of both a new book series and comic series, focusing on Ponyville Mysteries.
Yes.
How are the Crusaders featuring in that?
So it's almost kind of like some side adventures. I don't know if you guys have had a chance to read the books yet. I'm only working on the books, and Christina is writing the comics. But it was a neat kind of sidebar where they could have adventures as well and kind of step up into out of their big sister's shadows a little bit. Which is something like in the first book, Apple Bloom is really struggling with. So it's just a 6-book series, and the 5th one is coming out, I think, on the 3rd of this month, so pretty soon. And Michael Vogel and I are co-writing those under the pen name Penumbra Quill, which was a lot of fun to make up a pen name. I mean, we had like a whole list, but that's the one that stuck. So.
And as someone who goes by Silver Quill, I really want to compliment your use of pseudonyms.
Hey, thanks. It must. Maybe our OCs are related.
Oh, that'd be something. Can we make that canon? Actually, but that is a perfect opportunity because we have a little something for you.
Oh, wow.
It's a box.
Yay! I love them.
Actually, someone who writes with the name Penumbrum Quill deserves a Penumbrum writing quill.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Now, as I understand, you were also the first female writer for the Flash comics.
Oh, yes, that's right. I did a story in one of the Flash annuals.
Excellent. And, well, what was that about? I'm not as caught up with Flash as I am My Little Pony.
Oh, sure, no problem. So it was kind of just a one-off side story as well. I just did one for Bruce Lee, too. These one-shot comics is kind of where I've found myself. But the Flash comic was a little bit about how the small things that you do in life have big circumstances and consequences you might not realize at the time, whether that's negative or positive. So always try to put a little bit of good in the world, and even when you feel like you failed, sometimes you'll succeed later. So that's kind of the arc of that story.
Well, that is a fantastic message. Speaking of having good in the world, we have Keating Rogers.
I'm so sorry I'm late. We were told 2:30, and I was in the vendor hall, and I just booked out over, so sorry.
No worries, we're all here. We're glad to have you.
Thank you.
Now it's interesting, well, Nicole started working through television in acting roles. I understand you were a professionally trained stage actor.
Yes.
For a good time. And, but you joined working at outlines for the Powerpuff Girls and were part of basically the cartoon renaissance.
Yeah, I really just fell into that very accidentally. I was first a production assistant on Johnny Bravo, and then that show was shelved for a bit. And then I moved on to Powerpuff Girls as a production assistant. And at that time, I had a play that I wrote, it was being produced in Hollywood. And so I put posters up all over Cartoon Network and was, telling people to come see my play. And they were, on the Powerpuff staff, they were having problems with the head writer. And I was sitting there as production assistant going, I could do this, I could do this. And so the day I got brave enough to approach Craig McCracken was the day he wanted to approach me and ask me if I would want to try and write for the show. So I started out freelancing for the show, writing outlines, and then by the end of that year, I was head writer of the show.
And as a result, we got to enjoy your writings through seasons 1, 2, 4, and 5 of My Little Pony as well.
Yes.
And I want to add a personal thank you for writing the main attraction, which is one of my favorite Applejack stories.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I know I had heard, through the fandom that people weren't fans of Applejack, which surprised me because I think she's awesome. And getting to write that episode where you really got to know Applejack more and see, this relationship she had with a friend was really exciting to explore.
Oh, it was wonderful to see. And as a gesture of both appreciation and celebration of the theater arts, I thought a little extra happiness is always welcome.
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to put this on?
Not a requirement.
Okay.
I didn't really measure my bulbous cranium, it would hurt, so I don't enforce it on anyone.
Thank you.
But, storytelling is joy and tragedy, but often I think we need to focus more on joy. So let's start off just by talking about both of your educations and how that led to the current careers. So Amy, you were studying at Occidental College when you had a teacher who wouldn't let you quit playwriting.
Yes.
How did this teacher go about encouraging you?
Well, I needed to take this class in order to finish my theater major, and I tried to drop, I just didn't think I was going to enjoy the class, and so I thought of dropping it, and I just needed one other course, and the other course fulfillment would have been speech, and my teacher said, no, you're really going to be good at writing dialogue, and I'm not going to even let you drop the class, so don't even consider it. And he just told me it wasn't that elaborate. He just said, I think you're going to be good at this. And I think as soon as he said that, I still wasn't sure I was going to be good at it, but I went, well, at least I'm going to try.
So I guess sometimes that's all you need, right?
Yeah.
A little word of encouragement.
Yeah.
And Nicole, after when you went to go study at Yale University, you chose to pursue writing as well. What prompted you to make a transition from acting in front of the camera to writing for a show?
Oh, well, I actually stopped acting when I was about 14. I kind of was at that point where I was going on auditions with actors who were adults but could play kids. So they don't usually want to hire a kid for that role because you have fewer work hours and you have to have school on the set. So it was kind of at that point where I was like, oh, I'll back off a little bit. I just enjoyed high school and then went to college and studied English, and I was also pre-med. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, I knew that I really enjoyed English and I enjoyed writing. And I kept writing. I was writing a lot of sci-fi during that time. But there weren't any sci-fi seminars for writing, so I just did that on the side and ended up just taking a job out of school working at a .com in San Francisco. And that lasted about 6 months, and we all had our pink slip party, but then I had no idea what I was going to do. And one of the people I'd worked with, quite a few of them were from Disney, And they liked my sense of humor and said, you know, you love cartoons. If you want to meet our bosses at Disney that we used to work with, maybe they'd have something for you. And so I ended up moving back down to LA. I lived with my parents for a year, and I met these guys, and they said, yeah, our show just finished its first season, but here's a Bible to study, here are some scripts to study. Why don't you try your hand at writing a script? And if it's good, we'll hire you to write a script next season if we get a pickup. So I just spent that year reading everything I could, like studying at the Writers Guild Library, writing a lot of scripts, kind of like home study. And sure enough, their show got picked up. They liked the spec script I wrote, and they hired me on staff. And that was how I started working on Kim Possible. So, yeah.
Nice. Now, Amy, after you got your degree and graduated, you went on to CalArts to get a Master in Fine Arts. How much did the playwriting class influence that decision?
The playwriting class didn't influence it at all. The reason I went to get my MFA is my mom, while being very encouraging and as far as my being an actor, she also was very aware that being an actor is very challenging. And so she wanted me to be able to teach acting in the event that I couldn't actually get jobs as an actor or as a side thing. So if you get your MFA, at least in this time period, when I was getting it, if you got your MFA, that was what's called your terminal degree, and you could then teach in colleges. And my mom was a math professor at Occidental College also. And so she just wanted me to have the opportunity to be a teacher and like pay my bills. So I went to CalArts and I studied acting, and then I continued writing plays during that time. So it was always something, I was focused on acting, but playwriting was also something that I really enjoyed.
Oh, excellent. Not to write the future or anything, but have you ever thought, would you like to teach?
I have. I think it's so interesting. My mom never, I think she acted once in her life, and she actually broke out in hives. It made her so nervous. But she was an excellent teacher and very comfortable in front of a classroom. And I was like, Mom, that's kind of the same. She's like, no, it's completely different. And I understand now more what she means. I know I could get on a stage and act, and if I'm given a script, I can learn that character, but I'm not positive I could teach it to other people, because that's a very special skill in itself. I'm not sure I have it. I haven't tried it. Maybe I'd figure it out, but I'm not sure whether that's my skill.
Well, always more to discover.
Yeah.
Nicole, you mentioned that there were no sci-fi classes, and that pinged a memory with me. When I was in a writing class, the teacher said, you are not allowed to write science fiction in this. That's too easy. I beg your pardon. That was what I didn't say out loud. But do you think schools would benefit from a sci-fi class, or?
Yes, I mean, I do. I think, writing is writing, and whatever genre you're writing in is just as, true as any other genre. So I think that it should be encouraged to explore what you want, the stories you want to tell. I think Yale might now offer that, more focused. But yeah, I would submit my sci-fi stuff to every time there was a writing seminar that came up, and basically got the same response as you did, which is like, no, we're not interested in sci-fi. We're interested in real fiction. So, but I think that the good part about that was that, they didn't want it, but that didn't stop me from writing what I felt like I wanted to write. And here's where I am. I'm a writer now. So I think there's a good lesson in that.
Amy, one misconception out there is that when a person graduates, they immediately go into their field of study. But as I understand, you for a time were working for 1-800-DENTIST.
Yes. So 1-800-DENTIST, if you're older, you might know about it. If you're younger, you probably don't. It was a referral service to dentists, and so people would call 1-800-DENTIST and say, and I was on the other end, and I'd say, 1-800-DENTIST, this is Jane. Can I help you find a dentist? I was Jane because people used, back in that day, they used the phone number as a 1-900 number, and they used my name for other things, and it got gross. So I became Jane, and Jane would refer you to dentists. I would look up I'd put your zip code in, and if you're in Bellevue, Washington, I would help to find you a dentist in your area.
call me morbidly curious, but was there ever an audition for an acting role that involved being a dentist? Little shuffle horses.
Yeah, there wasn't a role that I auditioned for, but yes, that is a role.
Did you ever audition for a dentist role by chance?
I didn't actually, no.
I want to jump in on this thing because I actually, in that 6 months, I still had to pay my rent in San Francisco. So I worked for a medical billing company. Very similar experience, only my company didn't have a lot of people. So I had to pretend to be different people when you'd call in and transfer you and practice different voices. And yeah, that was kind of stressful, but also kind of fun. But the billing part, not so much.
I'm learning so much about the medical care industry right now. Even their phone calls are lies. Well, all right, speaking of Kim Possible, how did writing for a show differ from acting out, or in this case it's animation, but was it a different concept, or did your experiences on other shows sort of prepare you to how to stage it out in your head?
I feel very lucky that I got to be a child actress because of that, because I was exposed to so many scripts that the format was kind of hardwired in my brain. And you also start to get an ear for how dialogue lands and how jokes play. So I felt like that was kind of a leg up for me in learning to write animation and write in the screenplay format. So yeah, I also act out. I'm sure you do the same thing when you're writing. You act out your characters, you say they're,
Definitely.
yeah, we all have voices
Yes.
for the characters,
Yes.
which we'd be very embarrassed to do in front of the voice actors. So, you know, you do a lot of talking to yourself and staging stuff, so.
Did this ever lead to someone like in the next cubicle or office just looking over, was like, what are you doing?
You know, well, in animation, basically the artists look at you, they're like, oh, writers. So they know, they expect it.
And similarly, I think because I read so many plays, when it came to writing, it was like, oh, I get it. I wanted to be a child actor, and but I didn't get to. I missed out. But instead, I acted in plays, and I read many, many plays in, you know, from high school to college to graduate school, and it's true. The more you read, the more it just kind of gets in your body and in your brain, and so writing becomes, I'm not going to say easier, but you have it in your body and stuff.
And as a fan of dialogue, I understand that when you were writing outlines for Powerpuff Girls, you'd recommend lines of dialogue.
Oh, yeah, that stopped quickly. So, so I didn't understand. So when I started writing on Powerpuff, you know, I was a playwright first, and I love dialogue. And so then I started writing outlines, and I think of these hilarious lines. At least they were hilarious to me. So I'd be like, Bubbles, and she says this, and Buttercup says that. And then an outline is then given to the storyboard artist who does the dialogue and draws the panels on a storyboard-driven show. And then we'd go to the pitch where they're pitching out their storyboard, and none of my dialogue was in there. And at first I was crushed, thinking, you know, oh, they didn't like my lines. And then I went, no, that's not, my current job isn't to write dialogue, that's their job. And I just had, and it's different with every kind of outline that you write. Some outlines it's okay to put dialogue, just that wasn't the style of Powerpuff. So I stopped doing that and just told the story without dialogue.
Have there been other instances now that you do write for shows and write the dialogue? Are there instances where a line or idea has to be shot down?
Oh, always.
Have you worked, is there any advice you can give to folks about, you know, it's hard when an idea might get rejected?
Yeah, I mean, I was just doing an interview and talking about how getting notes is never easy. You always want to, like, whenever Megan McCarthy would email me about the notes on a script, she's like, don't flip your desk, but this is the note. And then I would get really mad and just kind of fume a bit for, you know, a while, and then I'd sort it out and go, okay, I can see how it can work like this. But at first you're a little pissed off, and because you think you've put all this time and effort, you think what you've written is brilliant. And how could they possibly want to change it? But then, you know, you let that go and you move on and you adjust accordingly, and that's also what you're paid to do. So and it, you know, hopefully it makes the script better.
Nicole, similar question. Submitting ideas and then how they're handled, or accepted, rejected.
Oh yeah, I mean, and the thing is, it's just like with acting, you don't know why sometimes they're getting rejected. You might not know that, oh, they tried this storyline last season and it didn't work, they had to kill that script so they're not doing this. Or like, oh, we haven't been selling this much of this character's toys, so we don't want to feature them. So you can't really take it personally because you don't necessarily know the whole backstory. But like Amy was saying, it's nice to take that 24 hours when you get those notes, rant and rave, I go for walks, you know, and then there's a certain turning point where you're like, well, you might not be entirely wrong. And then you start thinking of solutions. And so I feel like you need that marination time to get back around to that. But, another thing is like improv is such a good way to practice if you're, so you don't get precious about your jokes, right? Because there's always another joke coming down the line. You know, like that one game where you clap and you say, should have said, and then you give another line. That's a quick way to kind of just work through that of like, you know what, there's always more coming.
I'll have to recommend that to Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's fun. Amy, so you told us about how you met Craig and he invited you into the show. So you were, just to recap, you were putting up posters celebrating your new play and he just sort of welcomed you on board. How did you first get to know him?
At first I didn't, I mean, I was a production assistant and I'm a naturally very shy, introverted person, and Craig, I think, is even more shy and introverted. And so we didn't really talk to each other, and he was very busy doing his job and, you know, drawing storyboards and, you know, dealing with story and everything. And I was making copies and dropping them off to his office. We didn't really have a reason to converse that much. But then I got to know him because then I was in a story room with him. And so, you know, we'd be bouncing ideas off with, you know, all the other storyboard artists.
Would you describe that as networking? Because when I say the word networking, I get this image of Rolodexes in my head and going to really boring parties where no one's smiling.
I think that it was just my job. That wasn't networking. I didn't talk to him because there wasn't really an opportunity until I was in the writer's room. Or, you know, I wasn't brave enough until the day I went and asked him to give me a chance writing.
But I'm glad you had that courage.
Yeah.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Yeah, me too.
Nicole, you learned about Milo Point. We're working on Transformers rescue bots, and working down the hallway, as I understand.
Right.
Is there ever like inter-office tension, maybe some spitballs going across the way?
How come Ponies keeps getting more advertisement than Transformers? that was what was going on at Hasbro. But no, it was also really exciting because you'd walk in on conference rooms and the Pony crew would have left the story beats of the episodes and we'd be like, oh, so that's what's going to happen. So you kind of got to be on the inside there, yeah.
But it was sort of fun to just see these different pools of...
Super fun. And I was at Hasbro since the inception of the hub because I was up there for Transformers Prime. So it was neat to kind of watch both shows grow at the same time. And yeah, no, and I've loved Pony from afar for a long time, so it's nice to be here.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Amy, you said that being hired by Craig was an example of putting trust in a new encounter and it paid off. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for folks when maybe a trust in a new encounter doesn't pay off?
Gosh.
It's a tough test of trust.
I mean, I don't know if I have like an example of that, but I think you should always, you know, try. And I mean, it's like we were recently at a Disney Junior mixer together. And I'm terrible at going up to people and introducing myself to them. But as far as your networking question goes, you have to try and put yourself out there because that's how you make connections and somebody might remember you. This poor guy, I walked up to him and introduced myself to him. He's like, we've met before, Amy. And his name is Dan, and I'm gonna remember it forever now. And I was like, he's like, Amy, you've written for me. And I said, oh, but on that show it was remote. We just, you know, corresponded via email. He's like, Amy, we've had 2 meetings together. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, Dan. And then I began to remember him. He's like, that's okay, I forget myself too. But I think now I'll remember Dan and he'll remember me all the better because I forgot him. And we had this unusual, you know, exchange. Awkward.
Well, a little bit on topic about when you
I like that you just turned to me for that. That's good.
I know, this isn't a leading question at all. But when you transitioned from Cartoon Network Studios to DHX, or for the Hub, was there any culture shock in working for different networks?
So I have only had the pleasure of working on one episode for a show on Cartoon Network, but coming from Disney and Nickelodeon versus the Hub, I mean, every studio is different. They have their own kind of, I don't know, flavor. I describe it like when you have different professors or teachers at school. You know that they're going to want essays written a different way, for instance, or have their own quirks. That's kind of like what it is, jumping from studio to studio. You just have to learn the culture of the place and what jokes fly there and what jokes don't. Yeah, so there was a little bit of a difference, but what I really liked about the Hub and HASBRO is it seemed like it was super laid back. I don't know if you felt the same way, and I can't speak to Cartoon Network, so I don't know, but it felt like we had more freedom to just write stuff and not have people looking over our shoulders at every second. So.
Yeah, when I was at Cartoon Network, it was this golden age, and like people moved from show to show together, and it was just this big family, and we would go bowling once a week at lunchtime, and there were parties up on the roof, and so it was this beginning time, and there was a lot of excitement. And then I haven't had like a staff position until the show that I'm on currently. So like with the Hub and HASBRO, yeah, I was a gun for hire, so I would come in, and so I don't know the vibe of their studio as well, because it wasn't an everyday thing. So yeah, but they are all very different.
And the show you're working on right now is called The Star Darlings.
No.
No, you've got something new?
I was working on Star Darlings. I spent 2 years at Disney in their Disney or Digital Consumer Products Interactive. I'm hoping I get the DCPI things correct. That job ended, and now I'm on a Disney Junior show that is early in production, and I can't say the name of it, but it's very cute and a lot of fun to work on.
All right, that's something to look forward to.
Yeah.
But writing for the cute and fun ponies of MLP, looking at the episodes you've written for, you've introduced a lot of enduring characters and expanded lore. We got Sakura through Bridal Gossip. We got Cranky Doodle through A Friend Indeed. This went longer than we thought.
No, I mean, like with Bridal Gossip, Lauren knew she wanted Sakura in there. She wanted to introduce this zebra who was an outsider and tell that story of not judging a book by its cover. And the first draft of that, Sakura's dialogue didn't rhyme. And Lauren said, oh, you have to do something unusual to make her seem different. And so I was like, oh, I love Shakespeare and Dr. Seuss. And so I put those two loves together and made Sakura rhyme. And all the other writers hated me for it.
Oh, no. It's awesome. It's awesome. I do, yeah. Thank you for doing that. It's really fun.
And then Cranky Doodle Donkey, that was just, the episode, it was, these characters came from, what is going on in the episode. Pinky loves to make the other ponies smile. She runs into a cranky donkey who won't smile. And we knew his name was going to be Cranky, but we knew we wanted him to have a middle name, and Rob Renzetti in the story meeting just went Doodle. And it was like, that's the perfect name for him. And then the songs that surround him made sense. Like I was writing them in my head in the story meeting. It was like, yes, that's it. And so it just kind of evolves as you're, coming up with stories and writing and rewriting.
Has anyone dared you to write orange into a script for Sakura?
No, they haven't.
Maybe it's just me, but I'd like to see how she'd react to that.
She needs to get cut off mid-line, but she's going to rhyme it. That's how we play that, I think.
Well, Nicole, you writing both the season 7 finale and the season 8 premiere, it wasn't just the main 6 and Spike, it was also Starlight, it was also Sunburst, the students, the pillars of Equestria. How do you juggle so many characters in 2 episode scripts?
Because I believe in all the ponies. For me, it was kind of helpful coming off of Rescue Bots because we had such a big cast there too, because it was, a whole human family plus their 4 Rescue Bots, and then we had some recurring characters and usually some kind of antagonist. So I gotten pretty good at scanning to make sure everyone's point of view was spoken to on a page, because you start making sure that the character is talking. You don't want to lose someone. And unfortunately, You may have seen in Shadowplay, kind of at a certain point, Spike just gets the short end of the stick because we kept having to cut back the dialogue, and you lose some jokes and you lose some character beats, and sadly, he lost a lot of lines. But usually you're trying to be really cognizant that everyone is speaking in that scene and has a reason to be there and has a point of view. So Rescue Bots was a great training ground for that.
Excellent. And again, you can have the inner office, so Rescue Bots, My Little Pony, which is growing.
Exactly.
I mean, in addition to writing for the show, you wrote the Journal of the Two Sisters. How is that different from writing from a show episode?
Very different because it was journal entries. And I just, I mean, with the second half, with the Journal of Friendship, I had the pieces that the ponies talked about, you know, you see them journaling in the episode. So I was able to, it was actually fantastic. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna start with this half of the book because then like a quarter of it's already going to be written because I'm just gonna steal from all these other people's scripts. But then, like in certain episodes, you saw, like, I think you saw Pinkie Pie journaling, but you didn't hear what she was saying. And that was my episode, fortunately, with Cheese Sandwich. So I was like, oh, what would Pinkie Pie be saying? I didn't get to write a journal entry. And so I just got to riff off of that. Then with the first half, with Journal of the Two Sisters, I actually went and sat down and spoke with Lauren Fast and said, okay, how did the two sisters, how did Celestia and Luna end up, they live in Canterlot, but Canterlot Castle isn't there yet because they have their own castle. So, what do you think? So we just brainstormed for a while, and some of the things made it in, and some of the things ended up changing. But it was just, and it was fun to really dive into what Celestia and Luna's voices were like, because I don't think I'd ever really written for them, at least not, I mean, they don't have full episodes like the main six do. So to really jump into them, but not just jump into them as they are currently, but them as kids. So it was just fun to, just another opportunity to play with characters.
I read the journals, and I noticed that Celestia paralleled early Twilight in her anxiety.
Yeah.
So I found that was a fun connection between the characters.
Yeah.
Celestia sort of represents the angle of what Twilight can be.
Can I just jump in with a side story about your writing? So I was interviewing writers to work on season 8 for My Little Pony, and I was pitching out the idea that this writer would write, and he said, well, actually, according to the Journal of the Two Sisters, and I said, you're hired.
That's a good criteria. And so people are saying, well, actually, Ponyville Mysteries. And with the mystery series, I do have to ask, did the butler ever do it?
The butler always does it.
Butlers. What are some more challenges in writing a mystery series?
You have to know what you're doing ahead of time, and that requires a lot of thinking. For me, the biggest challenge overall was that this was the first time I had written fiction that was going to be published. And it's getting out of the screenplay format is so different because you actually have the leisure to say what characters are thinking. And it was really fun to do that. And the CMCs were great characters for that, I thought, because they have really distinct voices. So each book we kind of tracked a different crusader. And so you had the exercise of writing in the different characters' voices and digging into what their fears are. And now I just totally got sidetracked from the mystery question. But when Vogel and I sat down to work on this, we arced out the whole thing first. So we knew what was going to happen at the end point, and then it became like, okay, well, who's kind of like, what are our monsters in each book, and how do those tie into that overall arc? So we kind of built inward, and we got to create some pretty cool Luna mythology that I'm happy about. So.
I think there are more than a few Luna fans in the audience.
Or these particular.
I'm sorry.
Or these two.
Certainly fans of these two.
Yeah.
I think we could say we're all fans of these two, right? There we go. Right, wink. Amy, you mentioned that you were relieved when My Little Pony dropped the education/informative stamp.
Yes.
Which basically lifted a requirement on the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, back when we started, when you have the EI stamp, you have an educational consultant who looks over your scripts and then tells you whether you are hitting those educational like bullet points. And so it just makes it more complicated and often less fun, because to tell a particular story about friendship in an educational way, it's hard to explain. Do you have a better way?
It's just, well, I always just think of it as like another set of notes that we have to service.
Right.
And sometimes a story is a good story that doesn't have a specific educational thing. This is kind of like throwing out the book of rules. Actually, now that I think about it in season 8, it's like, here are the criteria, and you can't tell any stories that don't fit these. But sometimes there are important stories that need to be told that don't have that criteria.
Right.
So that's why I think it's kind of freeing for us to have that go away.
Yeah, it was. Exactly. Us neither.
Never learned to read.
Never learned not to throw books in the lake.
Okay, some people have seen 803. Good. Okay.
Well, Nicole, you mentioned before that in receiving feedback, it's important to understand the spirit of it. Mm-hmm. Some folks give feedback that is meant to help improve and support of others. It may be not so positive feedback. Any advice for folks on recognizing that spirit or ruminating on it?
Yeah, that's a hard one because, sometimes you'll get a note and you're like, boy, I can do this note, but it's going to mess everything up. So that's when, and I know you're familiar with this too, it's this spirit of the note. It's like, obviously something isn't working, but maybe this isn't the best fix for it. So you kind of have to retro-engineer what prompted people to respond to this and offer their suggestion. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how to say how you can spot it as much as I think none of us actually want to take notes. So we automatically start thinking around them, if that makes sense.
Amy, you credited Lauren as driving that good stories come from really strong characters. Mm-hmm. Do you have any advice for future writers on how to shape a collected story based on just really core character?
I mean, you create creating characters and making sure they have a very specific point of view, and then, with the main 6, they're all very, very distinct. And so you throw them into a situation and they're going to behave differently. So when you're creating characters, just really know what their likes are, their dislikes are, their flaws are, and that way when you're throwing them into situations, you can, let them act accordingly.
Yeah, I think your Cranky Doodle story really spoke to that too, because, as you said, it's like, here's a character, this is what she does, let's introduce the things she can't. So setting those things up for yourself will help you come up with lots of stories later once that framework is built. And I have to thank Lauren and you and everybody who's written on this show, because I felt like I was inheriting these fantastic characters it's so easy to tell stories with. So I think that really is why this keeps going.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I've been hogging all your attention to answering my questions, but I want to make sure the audience has a chance to ask some questions. We have a mic set up here at the base of the stage, so if y'all like to just line up and we'll start answering.
Hello there.
Oh, yeah, let me. Go. A little bit lower. Here.
Right there. That's good.
All right.
Greetings. One of the things I noticed on a lot of your writing is that for a particular season, you'll have a particular subject that flows throughout the entire season. For example, season 6, you had the map. Season 7, you had the pillars. It's looking like season 8, you have very much of this new school that Twilight is teaching at. Do you get these concepts beforehand and then build the season's writing around that? Or do you come up with these subjects beforehand of your own design?
Do you want to speak to your seasons first? Do you know how? Oh, okay. So for 8, certainly, we were given this idea from HASBRO to have the school. So we had that going in, and then we tried to arc that out ahead of time. So yeah, we all sat around and thought about, again, what's the final episode going to be like, and how do we get there? Which I think is a satisfying way to write.
With season 1, we didn't have a real big arc except for the Grand Galloping Gala. Once we realized that, and it was while we were writing season 1, once we realized, oh, that should be the finale of season 1, we went, okay, well, we've talked about it in Ticketmaster, and then we have to, we wanted to make sure we kind of laced it through. And so we, Rarity with the dresses ended up being the third one, so that it was touched upon in each one. In season 2, trying to think what the arc was. The what?
One.
The what?
Not one.
There wasn't one? Well, that's why I can't remember it. And season 3 I wasn't on. And season 4 was that was the journal, yes?
Yeah, journal arc.
Yeah, so that was the journal arc, and Megan did know ahead of time. She's like, we're gonna have this journal arc, we're gonna have to make sure we have journal episodes, and each, pony's gonna have a journal episode, and then in between there, it was like, what kind of non-journal episodes are we doing in between? So yeah, you do try, like Megan had mapped it out beforehand, just knowing that we had to have those touch points along the way.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
What's the best episode you've written for, in your opinion?
The best episode we've written for?
Yes, in your opinion.
Oh, in our opinion.
On Pony specifically?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you go first?
Oh. I'm gonna say Crusaders of the Lost Mark. Just because, it was bringing together, finally we got to see the Cutie Mark Crusaders get their cutie marks. There was character development for Diamond Tiara, and it was a musical, and I felt very fortunate that I got to write that episode.
You're gonna see mine in like 2 years. Oh, sorry. But it made me cry, so I liked it. I hope you did too. What?
The star.
I'm in so much trouble, guys. I can't. I'm sorry.
Amy.
I'm pretty sure it stars a moose. Right? It stars a moose. No, I'm pretty confident it stars a moose. Yes, moose and squirrel.
It's a very special trifecta. That's what I will say about that.
Okay, Amy,
Yes.
your strength really is in creating characters and giving them real voices. What questions do you ask yourself when you're trying to build a new character?
That's what's going on inside my head. I just try and have them in that situation, and whatever the story is. And unfortunately, you have a story meeting where you're figuring out the entire story arc and kind of figuring out who the character is within that. So then then you write an outline and you figure out more things, and then you get into the dialogue, and then sometimes it's like with Coloratura, it was a bit challenging, and that was mainly because I got in my head that I was writing for Lena Hall, and I began to freak myself out. But then I just kind of tried to put myself in that character's shoes of, who she was and who she wanted to be, and then, being led by this, maniacal, manipulative character. And so you just kind of put yourself in there and get carried along with them. At least that's how I do it, and then play and rewrite.
I have a question for Nicole. So I recently watched the season 8 premiere, and I loved it, by the way. It was really, so good.
I was scared there for a second. Okay.
I hated it. But I did notice a very distinctively different feel thus far from what I've seen of season 8 from previous seasons, and I was wondering, was that an intentional, was that a conscious decision? Was there a discussion about we're going to kind of change things up a little bit, make things different, or is that just kind of a product of you now being the executive producer and a change of staff and the passage of time in general?
That's hard, because I mean, I'm sure some of it has to do with like the refocus on the school, making it feel a little bit different in that regard, and the introduction of the young six. And then I probably bring a slightly different voice to it, but I'm hoping that the characters still feel like the characters, because I've got, Vogel and Haber as wingmen, and of course DHX and Megan and everybody else working on this together. So how did you feel that it seemed different? Can you pinpoint what's different about it, or is it mostly the setting? I can't even see you.
Definitely nothing negative. I think the characters are still definitely true to themselves, but bringing in these new characters, and now we're seeing old characters in very different situations and different roles because of that.
Oh, okay, good, yeah. Then yes, that's what we were going for. I mean, it's kind of back to what we were saying when you're creating a character, right? This gives us a chance to put the main six in a different role, have them respond to different stimuli, see how they react like that. So I'm hoping that will continue to make you happy. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, Amy, thank you for letting me know that I'm not the only one who gets really nervous and awkward about networking sometimes.
You're welcome.
Nicole, I had a question for you. I heard that now you're going to be the executive producer for Disney's new The Rocketeer series.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I was wondering, considering like the tie-in books you've done for My Little Pony and the fact that The Rocketeer is based on a comic, would you consider doing kind of either tie-in books or comics for it when it comes out?
For The Rocketeer, I would love to. If they asked me to do that, I would absolutely love to.
Awesome. Great. Well, hopefully we can look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amazing work, both of you. My question is more as an executive producer than a writer, actually. I think one of the greatest things about My Little Pony, other than like everything else, is that it's so consistent in an output. And so many of the shows that I've loved, they've had, like you mentioned with Johnny Bravo or whatever, where they go on this 3-year break. And I'm wondering, how important do you think that is to a show's success, that it continually produces episodes that are good?
How important is in the success to continually produce episodes that are good?
Instead of like splitting, yeah.
Oh gosh, well, again, I'm back to like, since the characters are so good and the world that's been created is so good, it gives this show staying power. So yeah, I think
But I mean more like, instead of schedule slip, like we have with Johnny Bravo or Gumball or Adventure Time, where they just don't put episodes out.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you completely, my bad. It's really hard. You lose your momentum, you lose your fans, you forget where your characters were. I'm glad that we got to kind of keep going. At least, how many breaks did you have? Did you have any like huge breaks when you're writing?
We didn't really have huge, we would write and then I would find other work in between, but it wasn't huge breaks. And because, so it was Lauren and Rob for seasons 1 and 2, but Megan was writing on seasons 1 and 2, so when the torch got passed to her, she knew everything, and so I think that helps a lot. And then when you're stepping in, there's all of this fantastic history now, so jumping in, it's not like you're recreating something. It's, I'm gonna keep going and make it evolve and bring, hopefully something different and interesting that hasn't already happened, but still be true to what has happened. I think, certain shows, you end up, it's so weird with animation, and I don't know how much it happens in live action, I know it does a bit, but you'll finish writing, and then you have to go get another job, and so you like lose your crew. And so then you get a pickup, and you hope you get the same writers, but they might be on a new show, and then they have to learn everything. Right. So it can get a little wonky sometimes.
But in production the way we are right now, it's like, stuff was coming in from animation from 7 as we were, working on 8, as we were, looking ahead to what might come after that. So it's all, it's just like, oh, what show, what season, what episode am I on today? Because it's all one big flow, so.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the main attraction, Applejack Best Pony. Second of all, I've heard she's a difficult character to write as a lead. I was hoping you could comment on that.
Oh.
Didn't mean that as a diss, I just hear that she's difficult.
Right. I think it's because she's so steadfast and honest, and that can be seen as like not having a flaw, and the more flawed a character is, you might be able to, you know, somebody who's just really good, you might be like, well, that's really boring. I didn't find that to be a problem with the main attraction. And by that time, you know, that was the last episode I wrote. I'd written a lot of stuff. I knew Applejack really well, and I really like her, and I like her like down-hominess and everything. And so I think it's just how you wrap your head around it. Do you view her honesty and goodness as a negative, or do you be like, yeah, that's her, but how does that mess her up? And turn that around on, I think people might just get stuck on, oh, she's too good, and therefore she's boring, but I don't think that's true.
Thank you for coming.
I just want to jump in on this Applejack thing too. I don't know if you guys have ever like analyzed your speech for a day and seen like any of the white lies that you've told. And I mean like simple things like, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm great. Applejack doesn't lie. So when you're writing your dialogue, you have to be really careful about any kind of that, you know, thing like that, or even any kind of joke that's not clear. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think that makes her extra challenging, but I love Applejack. If I could hang out with any pony, it would be Applejack.
Hi, my name is Simon, and my girlfriend and I, aside from being huge fans of My Little Pony, we were also huge fans of Transformers Prime, which Nicole, Dubuc, of course, you worked on. And I was wondering, Nicole, you transferred over to MLP along with Mike Vogel, who also worked on Prime, and I was wondering what it was like to go what it's like working on a show that has a really long, drawn-out story from beginning to end to a show with more episodic content. And it doesn't entirely have to be those two shows, but just in your experience as a writer in general.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that in some ways it's more satisfying to work on the long arc content because I love world building and I love those callbacks, and I love that, you know, something you set up in episode 1 can come back in episode 45. You know, and the people that have been following on this journey with you, that means something to them. Actually, I feel like we have kind of the benefit of that in Pony a little bit too. But when you're just doing one-off episodes, while those are fun and great, you know, it lacks a little bit of that, you know, like really satisfying nature.
Thank you. This is a real treat to have you guys here. So I imagine in any show you've worked on, the actors, they sometimes have moments where they can inject their own personality into the character, or, you know, they show some kind of personality for the character that you didn't expect. I'm curious to know if any of those moments have inspired an episode or inspired some development of personality.
Okay, I'll jump in. If you
jump, yes.
Okay. I was just gonna say that Tabitha always gives us so much amazing stuff. Like you could just write whatever she says down. Yes, I mean, I've had the privilege of being able to listen in on the record sessions. So sometimes just the riffing that the characters or the actors do as their characters does inspire other stories. Or, you know, this is from Rescue Bots, but our actors started singing to each other one day and we're like, we're gonna fix you, we're gonna write you a musical. So yeah, that's the kind of thing.
Yeah, since I didn't get to listen in on the recording sessions, I didn't have that same experience, but once I saw the finished product and saw what these actors, you know, what they brought to these characters, it just inspired, you know, you could hear them more in your head. And so that inspired, like, okay, now I know where I can go with Pinky. I know where, you know, I get Fluttershy now. I see what a pain in the butt Rarity can be. And so it just really, really helped. Once you could see everything and hear everything, that was very beneficial.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole, you said earlier that during just the edit process and winnowing it down, Spike kind of got lost in Shadowplay. Something that occurred to me while I was watching it, we've got the connections between the pillars and the main six, and it really seemed to me that Stygian was their Spike. And I'm just curious if that was a deliberate thing, because it was never made explicit, but that might have gotten lost along with Spike, or is that just my headcanon?
I think we were thinking that Stygian was their Starlight, is what we were thinking as far as the 7. You know, to me, I think of Spike as Starlight, as a Twilight's family. That's what I always think of him as. I mean, I know there's a lot of, like, everyone has an idea of what he is, but in my mind, he's like her little brother. So, yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you for being here. Just wanted like a comment and then like a question. First thing I want to say is just I really appreciate the writing, like how it seems to me everything's resolved through, instead of like through violence, plots are resolved through like humility, bravery, self-sacrifice, and self-reflection of the characters. And then my question is, it seems to me that the each of the main 6 characters at least has a very specific personality type, and that comes with weaknesses that are inherent to that. And it seems that each of the plots rely on challenging the weaknesses of that personality type. And so I was wondering, is that something that's always been, like how early does that happen in the process? Has that been very intentional since the beginning? Or?
The characters' strengths as well as their weaknesses?
Yeah, like the
that was from the beginning. Yeah, when Lauren wrote up the Bible, she had strengths, weaknesses right in there in the character descriptions. So those were things that she absolutely had there from the beginning, which I think made creating these characters so like fulfilling and interesting, and I'm not going to say easier because, you know, we hit bumps in the road as we went along, but we knew, you know, we had a much better map on, and because of how specific Lauren was with those characters.
All right, thank you.
Oh, hello there. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
When you were telling us a little earlier that the school that you developed for season 8 was actually a director from HASBRO to include in the show for this season, I was curious how much of it, the young 6 that we now have, was input from HASBRO, and how much of the characters did you develop on your own as a staff of DHX? How much of the characters' names, personalities, species was the staff's idea, and how much of that came from HASBRO?
That was Vogel, Haber, and me in a room coming up with who these characters would be. And then once we had that, DHX started designing them, and then we started our back and forth. And of course, the names also, it's like, what's going to clear legal? Because of course, our first set of names did not clear. So yeah, that was, but they did not come from HASBRO.
What were they?
All right.
Are you allowed to say what some of the names that were left behind?
I'm trying to remember now. I think Silver Star, I want to say, is one of them. And Brian, are you out there? Do you remember any of the old ones?
I know I was putting the wrong one in for a long time.
I know, yeah. I think it actually might have been Yana instead of Yona. And then I want to say Blaze. Yeah, so anyway, that's what I remember right now, sorry.
Well, I think Smolder was a cuter name for a young dragon anyways. Thank
You're
you.
right.
Has there been a call for a pony named Bob?
Bob the Pony.
Bob the Pony.
It's like Pear Steve.
Steve, Bob, you never know.
Amy, you wrote for the show while Faust was in charge, and then again after her departure when she was no longer involved with the show. And I was wondering if there were any major differences that you experienced writing for the show while Faust was in charge, and then when she was no longer in charge.
I mean, the difference was not having her and her voice there, and since it was her vision, that was just sad not to have her there. But like I said, because Megan was, on season 1 and knew these ponies, the transition and actually, I wasn't there when Megan immediately transitioned because she started in season 3 and I didn't write on season 3. But when I showed up on season 4, it felt, very much like these are still the same ponies I wrote for on seasons 1 and 2. Seasons 1 and 2 was about, really finding the characters, and by season 4, things were very well established. So, that's obviously a difference. You know these characters much better by then.
Thank you.
Hello, my first question is Smolder a boy or a girl? There's been a lot of debate in the fandom over this.
She's a girl.
All right. And like you were talking about how you make sure to reference like you were thinking about like the books with your hired bit earlier. How much are the comics heated by the writers?
So we don't get the comics. I'm not up to what's going on with the comics right now. And I'm sure there's somebody at Hasbro keeping track of continuity that way, but I'm not sure who that would be.
All right, thank you.
Hi, Amy. I like your Oingo Boingo shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
So, yeah, thank you for being here. And the My Little Pony fourth generations have been a huge influence on my life and gave me a positive outlook. So I know it's still a ways away for the conclusion of the fourth generation, but it still makes me nervous because I know a lot of changes will happen, and including staff and crew and stuff. So I still want to see it continue to have like the fan base like we have now, like really energetic and so with the I don't know if you'd be able to say, but with the like fifth generation, would there still be like the same kind of ambition?
I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but really the fifth generation is on the horizon, but I don't think we can really talk about its development process right now in the stage. I think better we focus on celebrating the show we have and talking about the process as it is right now.
Yeah.
So.
I can say that I don't know anything about the fifth generation. Honestly, we are all, when the leaks came out, that's when I started to learn more about it, frankly, because we're in a different division. So, sorry, I don't have any answers anyway.
What does the process of writing musical episodes look like? Specifically, the songwriting process and integrating the rest of the story with the songs?
For me, writing the musicals is, you come up with the story just in the first place and make sure it's a good, strong story. And then you kind of go through and say, okay, where would a good, musical number or song fit in, where it's, hopefully moving the plot forward. And you just kind of go through and, you have to find out how many songs you get. But yeah, it's just, you're trying to serve the story, you're trying to serve the characters and write songs accordingly.
Thank you.
Hello. Kind of following up on his question about songwriting in the show. So you said you get a number of songs for each episode, or could you go into kind of detail on? Well,
if it's a musical number, or a musical episode, like sometimes it's an episode that has a song, and you have like one song in it. With the main attraction, she sings a song that's kind of changed, and it's the big flashy number, and it's all crazy. And then she sits down at the piano and does a more heartfelt, mellow version. That's probably technically 2 songs. But in a musical, I think we get, and it's not like they say you get 4 songs, but it kind of is, and you find out what you're budgeted for, and so you fill it out that way. Because you also have 22 minutes, and songs take 3 minutes, and all that kind of math stuff.
Thank you. Also, thank you for coming to BABSCon. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do either of you ever catch yourselves humming the songs that you're working on? Just
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we doing one more question or not?
Oh, if you have more questions, even if you've been up to the mic once already, please come back up.
All right. So I did have one more question. First, congratulations on making the music move the plot forward, because I've seen tons of movies that don't do that, so that's a very good thing. But the question is, God damn it. Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, it's all good. You can come back up if the question balances out. No worries.
Greetings. 2 questions. The first one is, did either of you work on Equestria Girls?
I have not. Have you?
I did shorts for the first Equestria Girls, but I didn't work on any of the actual big, or maybe it was the second, before Rainbow Rocks. I wrote shorts, but not any of the actual movies.
I've seen the second question is there are some trailers and episodes coming out for Equestria Girls episodes, so it's not movie-based. Are either of you working on that?
No.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Hi. First, I'd like to say thank you for your work on the show. And so, my question: earlier you mentioned something about working with each of the main characters' strengths and flaws. So that got me thinking. Recently, I took a look at Hasbro's My Little Pony website, especially the main characters, and you know, it lists their what their key marks mean, what they like or dislike, their aspirations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious. Everything they put on the website for each of the main characters was that determined by Hasbro itself or by writers like you?
I haven't looked at the website. If it depends. If they took, if it's the main 6 and they took it from the show Bible, then that's what Lauren wrote. But I'm not sure what's on there specifically.
Yeah, and I haven't written any content for the website, so I don't know either. I'm sorry.
Just curious. Again, thank you for your work.
Sure.
Thank you for coming as well. I was just wondering, were there any stories that you wanted to tell but didn't make it into an episode for whatever reason?
Yes. And I usually found a way, so in Journal of the Two Sisters, in the friendship section, there's a Pinkie Pie entry where she talks about lollygabbing day, where she announces that it's lollygabbing day, where you just get to loll around and talk all day. And I pitched that episode and it didn't go anywhere. And I was like, well, now it's a journal entry. And also there's something that happens with with Celestia and Luna that I pitched out with the Griffins, and that got shot down too. And I was like, that's going in the journal too. So yeah, I kind of mined my rejected stories and tried to see if I could transfer them into journal entries at that point.
Yeah, I always say we use every part of the buffalo. So if a joke gets cut, it's saved for like later when we can use it, or a story idea. Something that got cut out of one of my episodes is that I did the pony version of rock, paper, scissors, so they could determine how to solve a problem. It was between Applejack and Rainbow Dash. They kept doing this throughout the episode, but it ran long, so we had to cut it. So no hoof horseshoe rock, sadly. But I'm hoping to find a place for that someday, maybe in the books. It'll come back, don't worry. We can keep playing it in the meantime.
Well, I hope we see more of the buffalo. Thank you.
An episode, somebody else's episode, not mine. I was watching it, and it was either Charlotte or Dave, and I'm watching it, and this song pops up. I think it was Charlotte. And this song pops up in it, and it's a short little ditty. Pinkie Pie sings it, I think. And I went, whoa, that sounds just like something I wrote for this other episode. And I was like, that is so weird. And I went through my scripts. I'm like, that is what I wrote. And they took it out of my episode. It got cut. And then they put it into Charlotte's episode. And I was like, is this just a really weird coincidence? Did Charlotte write the same thing? And I'm like, hey, Charlotte, did you write? She's like, no. So they just moved it somewhere else, which is fine.
Hi, thanks for your work on the show. Question that fans often want to know about creators they like. What are you watching and what are you reading?
Okay, currently I am rereading Naomi Novik's Temeraire series, which I love so much. And I find it very hard to actually watch narrative television when I do narrative television all day. So aside from iZombie, which I watch, I'm usually watching things like the Great British Baking Show and Top Chef. So that's what I watch.
I watch Survivor pretty religiously. I have from the beginning. But other shows I watch, that's the only one that's like coming into my brain at the moment. I recently watched on Netflix On Our Block. I don't know if anybody's watched that. It's a really cute show and you should check it out. I'm reading a book called Quiet. It's about how introverts are beneficial to society. Because as an introvert, I wanted to know how I'm helping. So that's what I'm reading.
Hi, Nicole. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
So, I've been a fan of the show since 2011. One of the aspects of the show that I really like is the student-teacher kind of relationship between Twilight and Celestia. And I was just kind of wondering if Starlight will be officially getting her own student. Yeah.
I don't think we can give away spoilers. To
Yeah, I
quote
don't know.
Verity, no spoilers!
I do think that season 8 kind of has our characters all stepping into that mentorship role just by sheer dint of the school being there. So I wouldn't rule that out.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Hello. Can you hear me? So I'm a little short. So, well, first, just thank you for your intentionality of the show and just putting your heart into it, because it's honestly felt everywhere. We have all these conventions. And this might be maybe like a difficult question to answer, but I would love to hear, are there any of either the main 6 or any other characters that you personally like relate to, or sometimes you're writing this and you're like, oh, like I struggle with that, or oh, that's something maybe I would react in the same way. Yeah, anything like that.
I mean, I relate to Pinky. I'm like I just said, I'm an introvert, but there's a part of me that's like Pinky, and getting to express myself through her words is something I always enjoyed doing, even though like I would never be as kooky as her, and I'm not the life of the party. But I get to be when I write for Pinky.
Yeah, I think sometimes I'm way too much like Twilight than I like to admit. That eye twitch thing is something that happens. I think also we resonate with different parts of characters sometimes. I was thinking as I was here watching 803 with you guys this morning, and I'm sorry that it didn't get a full feed there, but kind of the challenge that Pinky undergoes, I'm sorry, I probably shouldn't talk about this if you haven't seen it, but anyway, I'll talk about it in terms of myself, and then you'll see how that applies when you see the episode if you haven't seen it. But my sister ended up marrying a guy that when I met him, I'm like, I don't understand how you are possibly together. I just don't get this at all. And I don't understand why you don't see what I'm seeing, and I don't understand why you're not listening to me about this. And so that story, when I was able to ponify it a bit, it felt very real to me. And so like you're saying, sometimes you just have those pieces of that character, and you're like, yes, I feel that way too. That makes sense? Oh, I should apologize to my brother-in-law now, probably. Sorry.
You know what, frankly, I don't fucking need that anyway. Has there ever been an episode where a character does something, you're like, that is not right, how dare they do that, that is so unrealistic. Like, what springs to mind, I don't remember the name of the episode, but like, Rarity and Applejack have a little, and Rarity like ends up in like the overalls, you know, and she's just really mean.
Well.
Yes, exactly. It's like she was so mean to AJ, and I was like, oh.
You thought it was out of character.
Exactly. So, have you ever had that feeling?
Yeah.
I think all of us will feel that about our show, any show. So, I mean, I would challenge you to find a show where you have not had that moment, right? Because at a certain point too, it's like I was saying, like you connect to a character, and it's like, I know what that character would do. And certainly sometimes what the writer intends might not play out the way that they intended it to, so it feels like this jarring thing. But there's this whole scaffold under those scripts that I'm not sure a lot of people know, that like you were told to do it this way because of a note, or S&P said you can't do this, so you have to do this. So we hate when those things happen, but they do unfortunately happen.
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes it could be something that you've actually written, and then you see it played out. Like that no, that's not what she was supposed to be doing. And that happens because just different wires cross, different notes happen, and then unfortunately the writers tend to get blamed for it, which, you know, there you go. But yeah, that happens, unfortunately. And I get what you're saying with that character, but who knows what other things were going on.
Now, as I understand it, animation departments, writing departments, all a very large part structure may be in separate states, or even part of the writing staff may be in different countries even.
Different countries.
Do you think that helps with bringing more talent from a diverse range, or can it hinder because the human contact, the physical presence may not be there? Or
I think overall, like whenever I watch an episode, like kind of by and large, I'm always impressed with everything everybody else has brought to the table. It's like, okay, yeah, it starts with us breaking a story and writing the story and all that, but then it goes through all of these amazing steps, and I tend to be, yeah, sure, there'll be that moment I'm like, that's not how I wanted that to play out. But much more often than not, it's, wow, everybody else plussed this. The music, the voice actors, the artists. And so even though the animation happens in Canada and the writing happens here, you have so many talented people that it just gets better and better.
Yeah, I saw a post on Twitter recently that said anytime an episode of animation is made, it's a minor miracle. And I really do feel that, because there are hundreds of people with their own diverse backgrounds, talents, coming together to make this thing that we can see and then we can watch and respond to. And when you think of it that way, it's like, wow, that is pretty darn cool.
What is the most challenging aspect of writing for the show?
Okay, you have to choose something. I don't write for it anymore, so I don't know. But for any show, I'll just say that the challenging thing is coming up with strong original stories where your characters are challenged and grow, and making sure that you're not repeating yourself. And especially, I mean, this show has had a lot of seasons. That's really, really challenging. Even on the show I'm working on now, and we're super early in it. We'll come up with an idea, and it's like, well, no, we can't do that. We're already doing that right here. And so just keeping things, making sure you're not repeating yourself, I think is challenging.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. I think it's that, especially now in season 8, it's new friendship lessons. And the idea is to find new lessons, but also maybe to have someone else learn a lesson that another character has learned already, or even to revisit the same lesson with the same character, I guess, because if you guys are anything like me, you make the same mistake over and over again. I can't tell you how many times I have written the episode about a character that takes on too much because they don't want to say no. And I have now learned that it is me trying to instruct myself this, but somehow I have to keep writing that episode until I get it, so.
Hello. So by chance, I also read the Quiet book, and how do you feel being an introvert helps you at your job?
For me personally, which is the only thing I can speak to, I listen really well. It's tough in story meetings. I don't necessarily always speak up, which isn't good because you're in a story meeting and everybody's supposed to be contributing. And often, like, as we're figuring out the story, I'm figuring it all out in my head, but I'm not saying it out loud, which is just silly, because that's what I'm there for. But then I'm listening to everybody, and I'm seeing where the problems are, and then and everybody, I'm not saying like I'm super duper special in doing this, other people do it too, but I'll be like, oh no, this is how you fix the problem. So even though I might not be constantly throwing things out because I am introverted, I'll keep thinking, and I'll throw something out that ends up helping solve something. So, and I'm trying, honestly, to push myself. I'm like, Amy, you have to talk more. You have to put yourself out more in these story meetings, because no contribution is wrong. It's just a contribution, and it either sticks or it doesn't.
All right, thank you.
Hello. My question is, have you ever turned in a script that you you ran out of time to perfect and didn't meet your personal standards of what you would write personally?
Well, fortunately, we get multiple drafts. So the first draft might be a little rough, but then you get notes on it and you make it better and better and better. So hopefully by the end, when it's a final draft, you've gotten there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the train is just moving. Like when you start a series, that train is moving and it is not stopping. And I think I borrowed this from Shonda Rhimes, is that you have to keep laying track in front of that train and it's coming at you. So you have to get those scripts going in. So we're really lucky that we get extra drafts and we can work through it and develop stuff that, even if the first draft isn't perfect, it's in on time. Right. That's what matters.
Anyway, I remembered my question. It's pretty simple, although I don't know if you can answer, and if you can't, feel free not to. Were you intending to do more with the Castle of Two Sisters in season 4? And can you say if that was scrapped or if there's anything?
Like doing more as far as like building it, or
a season arc or something with it, because it felt like it kind of fell off halfway through to me.
That's a good question, and it was a while ago, so I don't really remember. I don't think so. Okay. I think that was always, it was supposed to be, this thing, and it got, if you read the Journal of the Two Sisters, they talk more about the castle.
I know that, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately.
She was saving it for season 8.
Yeah.
Yes.
So again, no spoilers if you haven't seen the episodes, but the castle does still serve a role. And we've only got about 3 minutes left in the panel, but I'd like to ask you both, is there any advice, encouragement, thoughts you'd like to offer to people considering getting into writing? Amy?
Okay, sure. First one is finish it. If you're writing something, finish it, because until it's done, you can't put it out there, right? The second rule is, of course, be nice to everyone, because you never know who's going to be hiring you someday. And I had a third one, but now it's escaping me, so I'm going to get back to you on that while she talks.
My rule is always be the person who's ready, because there are lots of flakes out there, so don't be flaky. Be a person who's prepared, and because that will end up, there'll be a situation where you being prepared will be very needed, and because somebody else will have flaked out. And so if you're there ready to do your job and do it as well as you can, that's like one of the most important things.
Okay, I remembered. Wear your no like a badge of honor. If you've turned in something, if you've had somebody reject something you've turned in, that means that you did it. Okay, so those are things that are going to pave the way to your future. I have a file that's called rejection letters. So whenever I get a rejection letter, of course there's a twinge, you feel sad, put it in that file and I go, okay, I'm that much closer to getting this thing published. So that's my advice.
With that, we are about out of time. I will plug that tomorrow, Amy will be at the Keating Rogers Crusader Clubhouse at 10:30, I believe, for Story in a Box, where she'll be helping families come up with brand new ideas. Oh, we can do a little mime time while we're at it.
And I'm with you, yes?
Yes, I'll have the pleasure of being there.
Excellent.
Nicole, do you have further panels or autograph signing?
I am signing tomorrow, I know that, and I think...
Yeah, I'm signing tomorrow.
I moved Toasty Writers tonight.
Yeah, if you are over 21, please come to Toasty Writers.
You guys, thank you all for your questions, sharing your thoughts, and have a wonderful BABSCon.